Hello everybody! Today I wanted to do my last video about 2021. I kind of forgot that I hadn't wrapped up the second half of December, so that's what I'm going to do today. This is part 2 of the December wrap-up. A little bit of a check-in. I disappeared for 2 weeks in January because I got sick again, and I did in fact have COVID, so I got to spend 7 days isolated in my house, and I have never in my life been so bored at home and wanted to go to work. I was so happy to go back to work. But yes, I was sick again, and then that just completely derailed everything again in my life. So I'm trying to get back on track this weekend. So with that out of the way, everything is going really well for me. I just have been crunched for time on a lot of stuff, and only now at the end of January has my interest in reading started to rebound, and I've had time to do that again. So yeah, let's just get the rest of December's wrap up out of the way and then move on to New Year stuff. Okay, first up is Burn In by P.W. Singer and August Cole. This is a science fiction thriller set in the near future, and it is predominantly a vehicle for the authors to pontificate about their ideas of technology and AI trends. I did not like this book, and I did not think it was good. So yeah, I read this with a group of friends. It was our pick for a book chat one month, and we pretty much all agreed that it was not good. It felt kind of like reading propaganda. I don't know how to explain this, but it's like the entire story about like an FBI agent or something working with a robot partner. It felt like this story was just everything put in place so the authors could dump in like 5 real-world citations on every page. It was just this way for them to talk about a bunch of modern-day technology trends and what they thought about that. The story in this is dragged to a halt every couple of paragraphs to do boring info dumps on what the author's opinions are of technology trends, and I'm just not interested in that. It could have been done so much better. I don't mind info dumping, but there is a way of doing it, and it is not this way. And I think that the author's personal agendas shine through in the story in a way that is frankly uncomfortable and unnecessary. Next up, I read Sheets by Brenna. This is a graphic novel that I had intended on reading for years and finally just did. It is about a teenage girl who runs her family's laundromat. Her mother had died in an accident in the previous year, and she's dealing with the change of that, her loss, her grief, and like her father's depression, how isolated he is from the family, and there's a local person threatening their family's business, and then a ghost shows up in the laundromat. It's kind of like fantasy because ghosts are real. There's like this whole ghost world with rules, and they actually like wear sheets and everything. And I think actually that this was supposed to be kind of a sweet, funny story, but I guess maybe it was the mood that I read it in. I found it very melancholy and a little bit distressing to read what this teenage girl was going through, particularly because her father is entirely absent. She's running a business on her own while trying to go to school, and then another adult is literally threatening her. And it upset me at points where I felt like I was having way more of an emotional reaction than I was intended to. So this was good, but maybe it just wasn't for me. I don't think I'm gonna read the sequel. I wasn't interested enough in the characters and what would happen next to them to pick up more of the story. But I'm glad that I finally checked it out because I was actually kind of wrong about what the story was and everything, and it was perfectly fine. Like I said, just probably not for me at the exact time that I read it. Then I read Yarnitecture by Jillian Moreno. This is a book all about spinning techniques. It's one of the highly, highly recommended books to beginning spinners, which is what I am right now. I got this for Christmas. I read it in less than 2 days, and it's very, very helpful. I really like it, so I will be referring to this a lot in the future. Next up is a novella, In the Watchful City by Qiouyi. Since I read this over a month ago, and it's actually a pretty complicated story, I'm going to struggle a bit to explain what I remember of this. I think my one criticism of this is frankly that it has not actually stuck with me that well. I don't think that I really remember the message, the point of the story as well as I thought I was going to. But in really like rough terms, this is kind of a magical fantasy world and a city within that world. There's also like fantasy science and technology in this, which I think is the coolest part of the world building. And it follows a person who has become part of the city's watchful network, keeping an eye on their citizens. So there's a lot of surveillance. And so this person is part of that surveillance, and they begin questioning what they are actually doing. What are the goals of the city? How much freedom do the people really have there? And I think how much they are actually helping the people that they are watching. And then a person comes into their life that begins telling them stories. This person is a psychopomp, and they have to get stories, like collect stories in order to come back to life fully or something. And the stories that they tell to the main character were really interesting. Like, I think I actually enjoyed the stories within the story more than the framework. They were just these very short, perfectly encapsulated stories that were all really different, but felt like they were part of this world. So I think the writing of this and the structure of it was really interesting, but I'm not sure that I tracked what was really happening with the main character so much. This one also has a lot of different genders in it. There are many non-binary pronouns used for all the main characters, and I think that this was, like, on one hand, really good representation, but on the other hand, I actually struggled a lot with remembering who people were, because like immediately the first 3 characters I introduced all have different sets of pronouns that I was completely unfamiliar with, and I eventually figured it out, but it slowed down how quickly I could kind of grasp the beginning of the story. And I found that kind of interesting. I'm pointing it out because I don't think I've ever read another book which had such a high representation of non-binary characters, where it felt like I was really struggling to assimilate that. So that may affect other people's reading of this one as well, but I did like what I think it was trying to do. So this was one of my anticipated reads of the year. I'm really glad that I got to it. It's really interesting to read something longer by Qiouyi. I think I read some of their poetry in the past, actually, from Uncanny Magazine or something, so it was really interesting to explore more of their work. Then I read volumes 2 and 3 of the Magnificent Ms. Marvel series written by Saladin Ahmed. This is a follow-up series to the initial Ms. Marvel run written by G. Willow Wilson. I loved that, which is why I decided to continue on with Saladin Ahmed's series. And it was okay. When I read the first volume, I just wasn't as satisfied with some of the plot decisions in that one. I was a bit irritated by something in there, which is usually a pet peeve of mine. And then volume 2, I liked it a lot more. And then volume 3, the series was canceled, and I felt like the end of it was rushed a lot. But I do think that within volumes 2 and 3, there was more development for Kamala and her family, and it would have been great if it hadn't been cut off so quickly with so little time to wrap up some of the loose ends at the end of the series. So there you go. I was prepared to like commit to reading the series long term after reading volume 2, so I was actually kind of disappointed to find out that volume 3 was just this very abrupt end of the series, but that happens sometimes. I don't read a lot of Marvel Universe stuff, and the Ms. Marvel series have been the only ones I've actually been interested in for the past couple of years, so I'm a bit sad to see this over with, though I imagine that all the characters from this will appear in other series, but I don't want to get into the Marvel Universe that much. I'm not going to go seek out all the other series and try to catch up on them. Next up is The Book of Delights by Ross Gay. This is a bit of a random thing that I decided to read. Ross Gay is a poet, and I came across him when I was looking up other things that Amy Nezuko-Matathil had written. I think she did like an essay or poetry collection with Ross Gay that kind of came across my radar, and then I realized that my library had a couple of his works, so I decided to check out The Book of Delights, and I loved this. This was almost a 5-star read for me. Like, it came so close, like maybe 4.5 stars. It is a collection of essays where Ross Gay gave himself like this project one year of like writing about daily delights and joys, and it is wonderful. Like, as a whole project is kind of a meditation on what is a delight, what makes you happy, what is joy on a day-to-day basis, and finding delight in some very unusual and fascinating places. So I loved the idea of this collection. And then the individual essays, the daily pieces, I think the fact that Ross Gay is a poet, and I think he kind of writes in the way that he's thinking and the way that he would speak, it was really, I guess fascinating is the word I'm going to use, because there were a lot of these convoluted sentences, but it felt like somebody was talking to me and just following their train of thought. It was beautiful and uplifting, very inspirational, and it was really great to read something by somebody who is actively seeking out joy and sharing it. I think I just love the concept of this, and will definitely read more by Ross Gay. My library has one of his more recent poetry collections, so I'm going to try that and see if I like his poetry as well. Next is a nonfiction book about whales called Fathom by Rebecca Giggs. I think the subtitle of this book is The World in the Whale. This is another kind of random thing that I picked up because I have been more interested in reading about marine biology and the oceans and stuff, and this was another very interesting book. It is mostly like environmental, about humanity's impact on whales and their environment, what we lose when we lose whales, how little we actually understand them, and some of the amazing things about them. And also, like, what I learned from this is that like the whaling industry was huge back in the day. I was surprised at how much of it still exists today. And how attitudes towards the whaling industry really differ from country to country. I'd never really understood that in the history of that. So this was a very informational and educational book for me. I really liked what I learned from it. But as interesting as this book was, it was also depressing, because there's no way that you can talk about this topic without also talking about drastic climate change and really negative prognostications for the future, let's say. So it does have this kind of depressing note to it. Like, there are some good things happening, but they don't seem to really outweigh the bad things when it comes to trying to conserve whales and their habitats, and they are truly amazing. So a really interesting read. This is one I would definitely recommend. It's just a really good nonfiction book. But I did not really need to feel so sad at the end of it. And the very last thing that I read in 2021 was Shards of Earth by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is one of his big chunky sci-fi novels, which I tend to really enjoy. This one was no exception. It is the first in a series, and it is about far future humanity that has been threatened by an alien species that can destroy planets, and that it is almost impossible to communicate with. There was kind of a showdown between the humans and these aliens, and the aliens disappeared and haven't come back until all of a sudden there are signs that they may have come back, and it won't be so easy to stop them next time. The story follows a bunch of different characters from various factions and like species conglomerations. So we have main characters who were part of the war, like basically heroes from the battle that drove the aliens away, and are now being called back into service in some ways. And then some of the leaders of other factions that are very alarmed by, you know, this alien presence coming back and, you know, the political upheaval of it. I really enjoyed this. I don't think I have much commentary on it though. I just thought it was a really fun sci-fi tale. It has a lot of sci-fi conventions that I really enjoy. Interspecies communication, discovering alien artifacts and trying to figure out what they do. I love all this stuff a lot. There's a little bit of like alien archaeology in there as well, artificial intelligence, etc. So I super enjoyed this and I cannot wait for the next book. I really enjoy Tchaikovsky's big chunky sci-fi novels, what can I say? Alright, so those are the last things that I read in December. We're done with 2021 now. This is actually some pretty good reading in December. I was a bit surprised how much I read, but I also had way more vacation time at the end of December than I had been expecting, so it worked out pretty well. It was a good end to the year, I have to say. So let me know if you have also read any of these books, or if you want to, leave me a comment down below. I will be back to talk to you again shortly about the things I read in January. Not quite so many of them. And until then, bye.